welcome to Horizen. It's actually one of my favorite projects, and it's always been an ethical, reliable, and ever evolving and innovative product in the space. And I wish we had more like it.
Well, I'd like to welcome to our show Charles Hoskinson, co-founder of Ethereum, founder of Cardano. Charles, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, Spencer. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I believe that you actually have some involvement with the project formerly known as Zencash.
Yeah, it's like the singer formerly known as Prince, right?
Yes.
Zencash, I met Rob years ago at Consensus, and I think it was 2017. And we had a long discussion, and I used to do consulting work with various projects. And Rob said, "Hey, would you like to come on board and work with us a little bit?" And I said, "Sure." So I came on as a private consultant. We kind of discussed around strategy. What does it take to actually build a cryptocurrency, build a community? What type of technology should you invest in? How should you go about team management? These types of things. And then there was always the crisis of the week. And so they'd always call me up and say, "Hey, what's going on here?" I say, "Well, here's my 2 cents on what to do." And then over time, that relationship evolved to an actual consultancy where the Zencash people there, Horizen, started working directly with my company, IOHK. And what we did was scientific research. And so that eventually evolved to writing the Zendu paper with their scientists and assisting with discussions about implementation and feasibility and these types of things. So it's been a very productive collaboration, all things considered and all around. And I've really enjoyed it. And I love working with Rob. And, Zencash is actually one of my favorite small projects floating around, along with Ergo and a few others. And what's nice is year after year, it continues to hit KPIs, it continues to grow. And even though it's small, it never gives up ground. It always gains ground. And that's a very encouraging thing to see. We live in a space with thousands of projects, and most of them, they get really exciting in the first 12 months and then they die out within 36 months. And the fact that Zencash has survived so much over the years and been able to thrive and continue to grow, especially in bad markets, has been a blessing. So I like the model, I like the people, and it's a great community. And I wish there was more of this in the cryptocurrency space, everywhere everybody gets along.
That's great. Well, as we have now styled ourselves Horizen to accommodate the greater scope of things, as opposed to simply being a privacy currency, one of those things that we have added is, of course, our variation on sidechains.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the relationship that we've had with IOHK and yourself, we've looked for inspiration. Our Lattice protocol is directly inspired by Ouroboros. So how does that actually look as far as to a community member who's wondering, what is all this noise about side chains that Horizen, what does that mean to me? And how is it involved with what Charles Hoskinson has done with IOHK, et cetera? And so would you speak to that, please?
Yeah, so in general, when you talk about sidechain, you kind of have two things that you want to accomplish. One, and this is when you want to move value between the chains. So there's really two sets of things you can move: information or value. So when you move information from one system into another system, we generally term that to be an oracle. You're importing information somehow into the system. When you want to move value from one system to another system, there's this concept of kind of a proof of existence and a proof of non-existence. The proof of existence is saying the coins actually exist. So for example, when you want to move Litecoin into Bitcoin or Litecoin into Ethereum, you'd like to know that those Litecoin that I'm moving into Ethereum are actual real Litecoin and they haven't just been invented out of thin air. The problem is that the receiving network has to know something about the sending network. So the question is, what is the minimum proof size required to be able to do that? You could run a naive protocol where you run full nodes on both sides and you replicate the entire state. And then of course you can verify that way, but then you have no efficiency with that. The non-existence is the non-existence of a double spend. So it's not good enough just to say, are there, these coins are real? How do you know I didn't also move them to Dash, or I moved them to Bitcoin or to another network in addition to your network, in which case you've doubled the money, right? So you have to construct something where you can create a proof that's concise and succinct so that a validator on the receiving network doesn't have to have the whole blockchain, ideally a very small, usually logarithmically sized proof. And you still can answer those two questions. The coins exist and they've never been double spent. Okay. So there are many different ways to do that. And some of them rely on very specific designs. For example, like proof of work, you say, okay, we have something called NEPA-POWs, non-interactive proofs of proof of work. And that takes advantage of a certain substructure within how proof of work works. You can also do that with proof of stake systems. So one of the things that we looked at was using zero knowledge proofs with a design called Zendu. And that was a joint collaboration between Roman Omelinikov and his team in Ukraine who worked for us and the researchers at Horizen. And they wrote a paper about that. And I think it's been since transformed into an actual implementation or implementation path. Now, that's just the movement of value. But then there's an open question of command and control. So when we look at sidechains, we generally think about independent systems, Litecoin to Bitcoin. They all both have different consensus algorithms, their own community, but there is real value in being able to move assets between these networks. But you also can look into a kind of a primary secondary model where one network runs everything, and then you have these secondary networks which are controlled by the consensus of the primary network. And this is actually what Blockstream was looking at back in 2014 with the original Sidechains paper, where they said, okay, proof of work can run many chains, and they will all get their security from the master chain that sits up top. Now, the reason why you'd want to do that is that you can have different rules and different engines for each of these sidechains. Like one can run the Ethereum virtual machine, and the other could have a different smart contract model, or like WebAssembly or something like that. You have different counting models, different network stacks, and so forth. But one token could conceivably power all of these different systems, and one consensus algorithm can provide security to all of those systems. So these are very closely related concepts actually under the hood, because regardless if you want a primary secondary model or completely independent systems, at the end of the day, you're going to have to be able to move value between these systems. You have to be able to move information between these systems. And one of the things we do is we systemize this knowledge. And so we say, okay, how do you do this in a proof of work setting? How do you do this in a proof of stake setting? How would you do this with a zero knowledge proof system, et cetera, et cetera? And then, those are open protocols, and any project can take that protocol and implement that protocol for the benefit of their users. So what are some applications of a system like that? One of the most obvious applications is the permissionless application. So all the time in business, you have a situation where the business just simply can't run on an open system. Maybe a country, for example, wouldn't feel so comfortable having its national elections on an open system. They want to control the consensus nodes, but you would like users to be able to seamlessly move between the two systems. Or maybe a supply chain system where you need to keep some things private and very locked down, but then you still want the users and the value in the supply chain to enter into a public system. So with a sidechain model, you could do that, where you have permissioned sidechains, and perhaps running on Fabric or a different code base, but the assets that live there and the information that live there can use the public system as a bridge. And we see a lot of people talking about this with projects like Cosmos and A.G.N.F.A.B and Polkadot and so forth, about having these permission sidechains or semi-permission sidechains that get security from a different system, and you have ephemeralness. You can move value and information throughout the entire system into different enclaves. It's kind of the best of both worlds, because you then don't have to upgrade the main network to be able to capture the business cases of the sidechains. You can deploy a sidechain that has its own life cycle, an upgrade cycle, and the main network is able to continue operating in a more conservative way.
Thank you. Two final questions. One, since this is a community-driven project, the Halving Party, do you have any advice for us as community members trying to help the project by helping it as community members? What can we do to make a thriving, vital community ecosystem for Horizen?
Yeah, so I think we run into this as well with Cardano and large projects like this. Like, for example, we have a product called Catalyst that we're building with Cardano. We already have 4,000 people that are involved there, and Catalyst is all about distribution of treasury funds. So Cardano is a treasury coin, just like Zen Cashes and Dashes and others. And excuse me. And basically Cardano, it has to wake up and figure out how do we allocate this money. And so there's a community-led voting system for that. But ultimately, you just don't give money to people. You give money to proposals. People are asking money, hey, I want to do marketing, or I want to do coding, or I want to do this particular project, whatever have you. So my advice to any community-led project is start with the end in mind. Start with the problems you want to solve, the things you want to do. And this could be local. It could be like, hey, I just want to put an ATM in my, my convenience store for Zencash. Or, hey, I want to, I want to do some local marketing, and here's what I'm going to do to get some adoption. And you have KPIs and you have an outcome, and we call it a proof of intention, a return on intention. Basically, instead of a return on investment, it's more of a return of intention. I want to do this, and here's how this is going to provide value to the ecosystem. Then after you have that pitch, go fight for that. In productive, effective communities can find a way to give grants to people that are there. So my advice to a healthy, vibrant community is have that idea flow, think local, and always start with the end in mind, and a very solution-oriented mindset. And have enough resilience to accept a few no's. The reality is, big world, a lot of cultures, a lot of languages, a lot of different concerns. And just because you don't get funded, just because you don't get the initial acceptance, it's okay. There's always tomorrow. And try to ask, what can I do better? How can I evolve better? In some cases, you have irreconcilable differences. Actually, that's how I got started. I was originally in the Bitcoin space. I did the Bitcoin education project. I created a course. I got almost 100,000 students. I brought a lot of people into the cryptocurrency space. And I said, okay, let's go evolve Bitcoin. And so I started talking to the master coin people and the color coin people and all these other things. And we just could not evolve Bitcoin. The system was not set up to enable community participation, which is why we created Ethereum. Ethereum was not a project of let's go do something cool and new. It was a project of frustration, where we were all frustrated that we'd spent years trying to do something with Bitcoin and we couldn't get anywhere. So just screw it, let's just do a new system. So that's an example of a governance failure. So you're in a healthy, vibrant ecosystem, and even if you don't get quite what you want, there's still a way to collaborate. There's still a way to partner. And you notice that year after year, the system continues to evolve, update, and grow, and welcome new ideas. You're not in a healthy ecosystem when there's a group think around only one way of doing things, and you never can adopt and evolve. Bitcoin, for example, knows smart contracts are a great idea. They know that they should change their crypto to Schnorr-SIGs. They know a lot of these things, and they all agree that these are good ideas. They can't upgrade. It's been 3 years they've been trying to upgrade. And before that, SegWit took 2.5, 3 years to get through, and it still resulted in Bitcoin Cash. So that's not a productive system. So to an open community member, say, are you being listened to? Is there good idea flow? If you adopt a solution-oriented, KPI-oriented mindset, are you getting a good response to that? And do you have the right tools to collaborate? And maybe that's where you start. If you notice you're not getting anywhere, but the community is friendly, then don't even worry about the ATMs and the marketing and the adoption. Start with governance and say, what tools can we build? What voting can we build? How do we actually organize ourselves so that we can better communicate? And there are all kinds of systems for that, holacracy and sociocracy and liquid democracy and so forth. And that's actually what we're building with Catalyst and Cardano. And God, it's a lot of work. We've been doing it for 6 months now and have a huge team who's spent millions of dollars, and we're implementing protocols that we spent 4 years researching. So it's a non-trivial thing. And the last point is be open to ideas outside of your ecosystem. The reality is that there are so many great projects out there like Polkadot and Tezos and so forth. And each and every one of them is solving something. And, no matter how hard you work, you're not going to be able to solve everything. So it turns out that it's probably a better idea where and when it makes sense to adopt ideas that are already proven to work instead of inventing a totally new idea and bringing it off the shelf. And that could be a new consensus protocol, it could be a new voting system and so forth. So one of the jobs of community members is to be those antennas for their respective community and go out as emissaries into other communities and try to find the best and brightest and get people to work with you. Like, for example, we have these sidechain protocols we're building for Cardano, and we said, let's focus on the proof of work side first. No, I could just go do that. Or how about I go to Litecoin and say, hey guys, why don't we adopt N.F.A.B here? And then you can suddenly send wrap Litecoin into Cardano and back. So we went and talked to Charlie Lee. We did a presentation at Litecoin Foundation, and now they're talking about it. And suddenly there's a great possibility that both of our chains can work together for the benefit of both ecosystems and at scale, because they're both very large ecosystems. So any community member can do that and try to create these partnerships and so forth. So I think healthy, vibrant communities, they don't have maximalism and say, oh, we're the best and screw everybody else and we have to win. Instead, they have a mindset of, what do we do well? What do we do not so well? And who should we partner with? And how do we bring these people together and partner with these people and know that you represent your ecosystem? Because there's no face to the protocol. It's a decentralized ecosystem. How people judge you are going to be on your worst actors, your worst community members. So if one of your people is a super troll on Reddit, then it'll tend to create an opinion that the entire community is that way. So that's the other thing I say is, in addition to all these other things, make sure that you have good community moderation and good community standards and conduct. And you work a lot at building resilience and building good conduct, because that ultimately pays huge dividends. People don't have to be here. They have thousands of options. Why would they choose the insular community that's very antagonistic and private and attacks new people over the friendly, happy, open communities that are, very nice to new people and so forth? And so always err on that side instead of the other.
Great stuff. One last thing, Charles, more of a philosophical question. I was just adding up the values of the various projects you've been involved in, and it appears that you're responsible for, or having helped to create, approximately $72 billion worth of value for the users of the projects you've been involved with. Could you reflect on that? And that'll be my final question.
Well, it's kind of silly to focus on the dollar amount when we print money for a living, right? We create our own currencies.
That's
so like, what's the dollar to these other things? The reality is my career has been about bringing people together and getting people to operate at their best capacity. So the real privilege for me is that when I was going to college, I read about all these people. Like I read Phil Wadler's papers and Gregory Rochu's work and so forth. And suddenly now they work with me, or for me. It's incredible. It's an absolutely incredible, surreal experience. You have these living legends in computer science, and they've done this phenomenal work. And suddenly you're now actually co-authoring papers and doing all these things. So that's one dimension of the job that's just super cool and humbling. But at the end of the day, you say, well, none of this means anything unless you're solving real problems. Like I just had an interview this morning with Ran on his show. He was a CNBC host. And we were talking about, well, what's the point of Cardano? And I say, well, Cardano is really about economic identity. It's really about saying there's these billions of people around there who are unbanked. And unless we bank these people, we haven't achieved anything. So we talk about who's the user of DeFi. DeFi means nothing to some kid living in his mom's basement in Connecticut, okay? He has PayPal, he has Chase, he has all these web services. That kid's going to be fine. But DeFi means a lot to somebody living in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia who doesn't have a bank account, doesn't have an identity system, doesn't have a credit score, can't get insurance, can't get a loan, these types of things. So the tools that we're building ultimately mean so much to the 3 billion people who have so little. So the definition of success for me is not, well, how big did the market cap get, or how much wealth did we create? It's more about how did we unlock the trillions of dollars of illiquid value that exists in the developing world because economic identity is not there, and give that to them. Now it'll take 20 years. That'll take 30 years. It's a career. But if we get that done, there is nothing in my life I could work on that has a more meaningful and deeper impact than that, to rise up all those people. And the other thing is that it's not just about economic identity. It's about economic identity with principles and values behind it. We're talking not about, hey, it's a new financial system. We're talking about a new financial system where you own your own data. You own your own identity. A new financial system where you own your own bank. You can't be shut out. You can't be turned off. A dictator can't wake up tomorrow and say, I think you're politically bad for me, so I'm going to turn you off. Just like, for example, I read today that the reason why Ant had terrible trouble with their IPO was because Xi got in a fight with Jack Ma. So despite the fact that Jack is one of the richest people in China, one of the most powerful entrepreneurs in China, because he ran afoul of Chinese government says, hey, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to fall in line. He has no economic freedom. He's a powerful guy, but he's a weak guy. It's like being a billionaire in Russia. If you run afoul of Putin, so sorry, you're not going to live very long, or you're not going to have a very pleasant life. Talk about all the oligarchs who've been imprisoned. So none of this means anything unless you have freedom and self-determination and control over your own destiny in life and financial future and privacy. So the point of the tools we build in my career has always been about how do we maximize that for as many people as possible, especially for the people who desperately need this. And the good news is we've made huge progress. We've written 91 papers. We've written a million plus lines of code. The Ethereum project, the Cardano project, these other things I've worked on, they really are pioneering in pushing the entire industry in a particular direction and have opened up a fertile field of 1,000 sub projects. And at least one of them is bound to make meaningful progress for that. So when I reflect on my career, you know, that's the stuff that really gets me excited, because there's going to come a day when I see some, you know, I remember reading a story about Bill Gates. He was in Narita airport in Tokyo shortly after Windows 95 launched. And he saw this Japanese guy sitting there waiting for the flight, and he was flying too. And Japanese guy was on a laptop tapping away with Windows 95. And Bill asked him, hey, what do you got there? And this Japanese guy had no idea he was Bill Gates. So he's like, oh, it's Windows. And he's like showing him all this cool stuff on Windows. And Bill's just smiling, you know, it's just like soaking it all in. So something would make me so happy is to be in Senegal or, you know, someplace and have some kid using a cryptocurrency and have no idea who I am. And, you know, basically say, oh, this is how I make my money. This is, you know, how my life works. And it's just natural for them. And it's just a product for them. I think that's the definition of success. And I think we can get there in about 10 years, 20 years. And it's going to make the world a much, much better place than where we're heading, and, you know, a cashless society and social credit and these other things. And so few have control over so many. I think we can get our power back. And that's where I'd like my career to go, in this industry to go.
Charles Hoskinson, thank you.
Thanks, guys. This was a lot of fun.